Shadow of Truth with your host, Rory Hall from thedailycoin.org and Dave Kranzler from investmentresearchdynamics.com. And today is Wednesday, November the 9th, 2016. And we have a special returning guest with us today. He is the managing editor of newsdoctors.com with over 25 years experience as an independent buy-side securities and global macro analyst. He also has well over a decade of experience as a financial journalist, editor, and political analyst. And his formal education includes degrees in economics, international relations, and an MBA. And of course, we're speaking of Mr. Eric Dubin, and we certainly appreciate everybody tuning in today. And here we go.
It was like, oh no. I mean, I'm glad we're not getting what we would have gotten with Hillary, but now who knows what we're going to get with Trump? I mean, we don't really know. In fact, I'm almost.
Some things we do know. I mean, we know that the glide path to nuclear war and World War III has been pulled back a little.
Yes.
Well, that's what's so funny. The Clinton supporters think that he's the warmonger and Hillary's the pacifist. That's what's so amazing.
Literally 63% of exit polled people believe that Trump is not responsible enough to be commander-in-chief under times of nuclear war threat or anything like that. Clinton was able to get that meme going, and people believed it, even though a lot of people who even indicated that they bought into that idea, they still pulled the lever for Trump. 63%, if I remember correctly, in exit polling indicated that they thought Trump was, a risk.
I thought it was pretty awesome on Putin's part this morning to come out and say, he congratulated, Trump on his victory and said that, now it seems that Russia and the United States can begin to heal and to begin to restore a real relationship. He said it won't be easy, but it seems that we have an opportunity to restore our relationship, and that is huge in my opinion.
It's probably the biggest victory that we can, easily point towards, because it was very clear that, the whole entire establishment's ramping up behind the neocon camp and the whole thesis of trying to get, America's unipolar world extended into the next century and all of that nonsense. That's now, I think we had kind of like a fight within the oligarchy and different visions on how to run American foreign policy, whether it's uber aggressive or just something a little bit less aggressive. I mean, Trump isn't going to roll back the American empire. I'm under no illusions about that, but he's a deal maker. He looks as a pragmatist, whereas the other camp had 100% of their interests buttered by this service of the furtherance of the military-industrial complex and all that represents.
It seems like that some of the less crazy oligarchs had a bigger handle on the situation than some of the others.
I don't know. I mean, when you look at what was going on with all the stuff with WikiLeaks, I think that a rather large percentage of the materials that they ultimately were able to get a hold of were being delivered to them by people within the United States intelligence community and people who understand, the big old picture of where our trends were suggesting the United States was going to go. And they were scared. It wasn't the Russians that were leaking. It was the United States intelligence agency community and people within the government and hackers on top of that, but not Russian hackers.
No, Russia didn't have anything to do with it.
Yeah, well, I mean, they've been around.
They have, but
they've done. They do things with their cyber capacity. I mean, it's not like they're angels or anything, but compared to what the United States does, I mean, and anything that any other nation does when it comes to cyber hacking and spying and whatnot, I mean, the United States does 100 times more of it. So it's just like pot calling the kettle black again.
Right.
It's interesting what's going on in the markets. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Well, you said yesterday that you wanted, you were going to jump on and uh, you were going to jump on if Hillary won, that you were going to send me a silver eagle and buy me a drink.
Yeah.
And
Roy didn't hear that. I don't know. Did he tell Roy?
and if Trump won, that you would come on the Shadow of Truth and explain to us why Trump won. And that's what I'd like to hear. I mean, I have my own thoughts on it as well, and they're
Sure.
probably somewhat similar, but I'd love to hear your analysis of this.
Okay, good.
Especially since you're, active in politics in Oregon. So, you see a little more of what's going on at the grassroots level, at least in Oregon, than a lot of people might see.
Yeah, I'm pulling up some notes here. So yesterday I published an article, Brexit 2.0, Trump's surprise will be caused by lousy data like Vocaster, and Zero Hedge was running a story about Vocaster data, and they actually did a pretty good job talking about what was going on as that one example of the way polls are managed. And this whole election has been managed from start to finish. And one of the things that I noticed last week was that, as we saw a lot of the revelations come out with the Podesta emails and just the sheer depravity that was shown with those emails, a lot of people were beginning to wake up and starting to question things. And what was interesting is the difference between what you could see in more regional and local polls and polls that weren't necessarily targeted from day one to be presented to a national audience. And when you look at the differences between polls, you can actually see where some pretty significant trends started to show up about 10 some odd days ago. And in particular, one of the polls I found really interesting was one that was run out of Iowa. And Iowa had 40-day early voting, and about a third of the people in Iowa actually voted before the election yesterday. And Clinton had a pretty strong ground game there. She had a 22% lead over Trump with those, some 1/3 of the people who had already voted. But with the remaining 2/3 of the voters that had yet to cast at the time of this poll last week, they had indicated that, get my numbers here correct, the net balance was that Trump had a lead of over 7 points on Clinton, but Trump had a 21% percentage lead, 53 to 32, for the remaining 2/3 of the voters that they were polling. And this was a scientific poll. I mean, it only had a sample size of about 800 or some odd like that. But with a 3.5% margin of error, and looking at the questions and the way that they designed the methodology, I could tell that it didn't reek of, the kind of crazy manipulation and framing of questions and all the other nonsense that we've seen with those national polls that have been all over the friggin' place. And it was very clear that, we had in the Farm Belt, which was what Iowa represents, and as well in the Rust Belt, a gigantic shift that started showing up about 10 days ago. And this Iowa poll showed it. So that was one of the tells, and there were other things too, of course, but it's just very clear generically the degree to which the mainstream media has been dogpiling on Trump as being the equivalent of the worst thing for America ever, and the growing reaction and pushback against that, and seeing how that was a groundswell. I frankly think that Trump probably pulled more than 5 points above what the public reported popular vote is. I think that there was a lot of vote manipulation with electronic voting machines and whatnot. And even yesterday, WikiLeaks, Julian Assange was pretty dour about the election, and others, people who have been in the Trump camp and championing what the campaign was all about, like Alex Jones and so forth. I mean, some of the more vocal supporters were all of the opinion that the establishment was basically going to rig this election and that Hillary's going to win no matter what. And the groundswell that was coming was big enough that overcame that. I think that there was a significant amount of voter fraud and rigging, and the simple fact is that Trump overcame it because Americans, by and large, are just very upset with where the economy is, and people are, the average voter, man on the street, woman on the street, is hurting so bad that the typical economy being the principal reason why people pull a lever for one person or another in a presidential election was really the biggest issue. When we look at the percentage of women and where their votes went, and 36% of women voted amongst the ballots that were cast yesterday, and 52% of, excuse me, I should say that is 36% of white women. 52% of them voted for Trump. And even in the Latino category, Trump was still able to carry 26% of Latino women. So, there were a lot of people who were typecast as being guaranteed to give Hillary a win, and many of those people decided that their better interests were served by Trump. They were seeing through all of the propaganda. Same thing happened to some extent with a lot of the Bernie Sanders voters. I think and I have yet to see polling that dissects exactly how many of the Bernie Sanders voters and supporters ended up voting for Trump, but there's a significant number of them in that camp too. So I think that those trends were visible last week, and it was really just a question of whether or not the vote rigging was going to be as extensive, sufficient to make Trump lose.
There was a lot of reporting going on yesterday about vote rigging and machines being broken or shut down, or all kinds of various reports from all across the nation. And I think that one of the things that will be interesting will be, I'm sure it's out there already. I haven't seen it, and obviously you haven't either, Eric. But the breakdown of the Bernie Sanders voters, because that was about 8 million people that you can say 100% this group of 8 million people were Bernie Sanders supporters. Period. And it may be a much bigger number than that. I mean, and that's a lot. That's a very significant number, in my opinion, anyway.
Here's an interesting demographic that I pulled up because I noticed it last night. Okay, and it was what happened in Arkansas. So in last night's election, 60% voted for Trump, 34% voted for Hillary. There was a poll that was done. It's called the Arkansas poll. It was done on November 2nd, and it had 51% for Trump and 31% for Hillary. So that was underestimating Trump's support by 9%. But what's interesting is the way that Arkansas's vote has shifted. I don't have the number for 92 because that would have been Bill Clinton's first year that he was elected president. In 96, 53% voted for Bill, 36% voted, and I don't even remember who ran against Clinton in 96, some idiot. But each year, the percentage of Arkansas residents who voted for the Democratic, or each presidential election cycle, the percentage of Arkansas residents that voted for the Democrat has declined steadily. So in 2012, 36.9% voted for Obama. And here you had in 2016, 34% voted for Hillary. Arguably, you would think that Hillary would be seen as a home state player for Arkansas. And so I was kind of surprised that Trump had such overwhelming support in Arkansas versus Hillary Clinton, who obviously was the first lady of Arkansas for many years. To me, it just tells you what the public thinks about Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
And especially the public that really knows her, which would be Arkansas.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment.
I know I don't like her, and I'm very glad that she lost, and I hope that Trump listens to the base and locks her up. I hope that he listens to the base and drains the swamp, because I think that those two rallying cries that really came on board, 8 weeks ago, is what really kind of, from my perspective, those were really the things that kind of pushed more people or pulled more people towards him and pushed him away from Hillary, especially in light of all of the emails, the continual dump by WikiLeaks and the Podesta emails, and I know it, to a smaller degree, the Project Veritas action and the information that they were able to get out and get as much traction as they were in such a short period of time. I mean, these things were huge, and they were so damning to Clinton and the Clinton Foundation and the whole corrupt machine that it is, criminal operation. I mean, so I think it's going to be very interesting to see how Trump handles that as far as
you know,
in the early
Obama's
days.
going to probably pardon Hillary. He may even proactively pardon Clinton, and Bill Clinton too, just to protect him. But the funny thing about a presidential pardon, you can only pardon humans. And if Obama pardons Hillary, that will draw attention to the whole Clinton Foundation. And basically, a lot of people will conclude, okay, where there's smoke, there's fire. He's pardoning her, and he's not just being a nice guy. He's actually covering up her crimes, and it might even empower the ongoing investigations when it comes to the Clinton Foundation. So who knows what will ultimately happen, but I think it's almost a foregone conclusion that Obama is going to proactively pardon Hillary, and that therefore she's not going to be, the target of getting thrown in jail. But whether or not the pardoning in and of itself and the ongoing investigations ends up making the Clinton Foundation a shadow of its former self and riches and power, and who knows, maybe the Clinton Foundation will be completely struck down. I mean, the nonprofit status could be revoked. They could have clawbacks. They could have penalties from the IRS. It could get really interesting because the kind of corruption and pay-for-play deals that Clinton orchestrated, though she may be protected and might find that her butt isn't going to wind up in jail personally, she can end up having her pocketbook drained and, the ability to do anything in public life completely obliterated to a grand extent. So, I mean, that's kind of like a jail sentence for someone like Hillary Clinton, and a just upcomings for her. So, we'll see how this all rolls. But the thing is that the Justice Department, the FBI, they're going to continue on with the investigations that are, involving the Clinton Foundation, to be sure, as well as other things too. I mean, the whole Wiener cache of emails could end up leading to a lot of the generals within the whole Clinton establishment being taken out. It'll be interesting. The same dynamic that I just spoke about when it comes to Obama pardoning Clinton and having that as kind of like prima facie evidence for some people that there is smoke and fire behind the scenes. So we'll probably end up being the same kind of thing if Obama were to pardon whomever. So it's going to be a mess.
It already is.
I'm not holding my breath on Trump going after Clinton or the foundation. I recall distinctly that Obama, before he was elected in 2008, said that if he was elected, he was going to go after the Bush people and he was going to undo all of the bad Bush executive orders. Yeah. And as soon as he got
Trump's
elected,
slightly more believable.
He never went after anyone, and he took the bad Bush executive orders and made them worse. So
what will stop anything, Dave, is not, Trump's desire or lack of desire. What will stop him is the kind of pushback that the control files under Clinton's control represent. I mean, she can, like Titus was talking about, if I recall correctly, I mean, she could take down, a quarter of Washington with all of the kind of dirt that she probably has. And that whole cache of email was called life insurance for a damn good reason.
Yep. Yes, it was.
So that's really what will ultimately, serve as the brakes for the Trump presidency. And that whole analogy actually extends to, any kind of reform that he wants to do. I mean, he's talked about canning Janet Yellen and reforming the Fed. He's talked about revoking FCC licenses for media that's gone wild with the consolidation of the media. He's talked about going after TTP and the transatlantic partnership trade deal and just scuttling those. There's a whole list of things that he's outlined that he'd like to do, and the whole kind of institutional pushback that'll come is going to make it just that, any kind of 100 days mission statement that he issues will not ultimately be what gets done. But it is interesting to see that he does want to drain the swamp and that he is an outsider, even though he's rich and his interests are feathered by being a member of the elite class. He's a nationalist. He believes in the nation state. He's not a globalist. He believes in economic nationalism. He understands that the Cold War rebooting and any notion of trying to go after Russia directly, which was in the outright explicit plans of the Hillary camp.
Yes.
I mean, people don't fully appreciate how dangerous the Hillary camp truly represents. I mean, these neocons and Atlanticists and crazed warmongers truly believed that it was possible, and they truly believe that it is possible. I should not speak in the past tense because they're still going to be pushing for this. They believe that it's possible to actually change the Russian government and execute colored revolution technology and overthrow Putin. I mean, that's the extent to which these people fantasize about the ability to pull strings on a geopolitical level, and Syria hooks into this, Ukraine hooks into this, and we dodged a bullet. Humanity dodged the bullet with this election.
I don't know. I mean, I wrote a blog post early this morning. It was the devil versus the Loch Ness monster, and the devil lost. We don't, I'm labeling Trump the Loch Ness monster because, we don't know what lurks beneath the surface there. I mean,
that's a fair
optimistically, maybe a mermaid, emerges out of the water, but we just don't know. No one knows. I'm not even sure he necessarily planned on being president when he started out on this path. He was probably doing it more for PR purposes. But I read an article earlier today, and just to remind you, he's still connected to the establishment. I mean, look at what he's already throwing out there to be part of his cabinet. I mean, you got Larry Kudlow. Larry Kudlow is probably the most heinous, idiotic economist of all time. The guy's a complete moron, and he was part of the Bush regime. And then I can't remember the guy's name, but he's got some VP from Goldman Sachs as his likely treasurer. I mean, I thought the idea here was to get Wall Street out of the government. Well, Trump's saying, come on in, make yourself at home. And the VP choice, Pence. I mean, Pence is really, he's part of the right wing side of the establishment. I mean, it makes me uncomfortable. I mean, I'm kind of uncomfortable with what's going to emerge when Trump takes the inauguration and is sitting in that seat. We just don't know.
Yeah, and a lot of people are punch drunk with the whole notion of Trump winning and that he's going to represent great things and do great things and make America great again, and so on and so forth. But the reality is that it's probably not going to live up to people's expectations in full.
And the police state,
which could be dangerous too.
I mean, really, the bottom line is the fact that this was our choice to lead our country. It really reflects the degree to which the U.S. is decaying at the grassroots level. I mean, it's a collapsing empire. Let's face it. And our choice was Banana Republic 1 with Hillary or Banana Republic 2 with Trump.
Well, let's talk about what's going on in the markets now. It's pretty interesting to see how people are, responding to this. I think that the initial jump in gold, it was over $60 rise, and now coming back down is pretty telling. I mean, we saw some manipulation driving it down, but I think as well, it's even fair to say that the expectations that were being, set, and the whole surprise that we see today with gold now back down to where it was is pretty surprising. Before the leap, I certainly didn't expect to see the precious metals and the dollar to reverse quite as much as they have this fast. But it looks like people are looking at the whole Brexit experience, and before the whole the campaign got underway for the election this week, the establishment was trying to paint the Trump win as if it was going to be a complete disaster, and we're seeing an echo of what happened with Brexit. Well, with Brexit, the powers that be definitely came in and pushed the markets back up and supported everything. But we've taken back the entire gain that we saw in gold in the last 24 hours, and that's pretty astounding.
Well, and not only that, I mean, the Dow Jones is now up 262 points from where it was when the market closed yesterday, when the world still thought Hillary Clinton was a shoo-in. So, I mean, the Dow, I think the futures were down. I saw them down about 800. So you had an over 1,000-point rebound from late last night to now. And I think it's the central banks flexing their muscle, letting us know who's still in control of the markets.
Who's in charge? That would be the people pulling the levers behind the screen. Has nothing to do with Trump or Obama or Hillary. It's all about the Exchange Stabilization Fund, the Treasury, and the Federal Reserve.
Right. Yeah, it's regardless who won the election, it's still the same wizard behind the curtain pulling the levers.
Yeah, I think that, that's probably about, I don't know, just throwing a number out for the sake of conversation, maybe more than half of what caused this, maybe 70% of the decline down. But I think there is also some organic sense of relief, and a lot of people are probably looking at what Trump might represent in terms of the infrastructure spending and the whole, effort to ramp up the economy from a fiscal side in addition to monetary policy. And I talked about this a couple of weeks back on Silver Doctor's SD Metals and Markets, where, a lot of people have been expecting that Trump would be a really strong, background change that would help precious metals going in through next year. And I still believe that we're going to see a very significant rise in precious metals just generically because of where our economy is and globally and banking system and all of that. But it is likely that we're going to probably see a period of time where a lot of people might get enthusiastic about a change in leadership and the possibility of a huge amount, $1 trillion plus of fiscal spending in the United States over time as well as worldwide. That maybe that's part of what's going on here when we look at the markets. I think that some of that is being expressed. It's not 100% manipulation, and
this is central banks flexing their muscle, because when I heard him give his speech last night about infrastructure spending, et cetera, all I could think of is this is the same thing Obama did, and it doubled the debt level. So now what's going to happen is over the next 8 years, our debt level is going to go from 20 trillion to 40 trillion. Country ain't going to last that long with that kind of debt.
Well, of course. I totally agree with that analysis, and we're on the same page. But I'm talking about public expectations and perceptions and what drives the animal spirits of the bozos that manage 95% of the money in the world in our conventional financial universe. And those guys and gals are going to be, looking at that as an excuse to ramp the markets up, because it's going to, once again, for a short period of time, indeterminate as to how long, is going to give people confidence that the quote-unquote Fed still has their back. That's really been the main reason why our stock markets have been able to be elevated and levitated since 2008, because every time we ever get anything over a 10% correction, anytime we have the fundamentals expressing themselves, central bankers come in and save everything. And people still believe in that thesis. And further pursuant to that, when they think about what's going to happen with this whole multi-trillion-dollar infrastructure orgy, that's going to have an impact on the markets at some point. And it's going to be a short-term, intermediate-term kind of thing, 6 months maybe at the most. And I doubt it will even get that long. But
with few exceptions, though, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that with few exceptions, the companies, the corporations that are on the Dow, excuse me, that are on the S&P, that make up those indices, aren't they all pretty much bankrupt? Or maybe not bankrupt, but they're all having a hard time, and the only
corporate
reason that
profits in the
they
United States suck. I mean, we've been in a corporate profit recession since about 2014, and the profits in the stock market have been elevated by cheap credit. Corporations have dumped way over $1 trillion of money that they basically were able to finance at next to zero, and buy back their stock and elevate the stock market. And so you have all of that element that is supporting the S&P 500.
But that's an illusion. That's all an illusion.
Well, not 100% of an illusion. I mean, companies still are generating revenues and sales and whatnot. I mean, the real stinky part of our equity universe is the financial sector, because they're the ones that have encumbered loans and derivative positions that can blow up on them if markets go the wrong way and all of that. And then you have the outright insolvent walking zombie banks like the Deutsche Banks of the world. So, the S&P 500 doesn't represent a universe of bankrupt companies. That definitely is not the case. But you can certainly make the argument that in the financial sector, which is one of the most important, if not the most important sector of the global economy when it comes to financial markets, that sector has giant problems.
I guess the point that I was trying to make is the fact that all of these corporations have been living on stock buybacks and cheap money coming from the Fed, or free money coming from the Fed, and being able to create this illusion that everything's great. I mean, and it's not. I mean, if everything is so great and these corporations are doing marvelously, then why are they laying off tens of thousands of people at a time? I mean, they're not. None of them are doing any good. I mean, and that whole illusion is just that. I mean, it's just an illusion. I mean, is the Dow worth really 18,000?
No,
it's not.
It's supported by cheap credit.
I mean, I think we're overdue for it to plummet at this point. I mean, and when I say plummet, I mean get back to, lose 50, 55% or more that of its value that, Craig Hemke has pointed out with his death candle, with the death candle march. I mean, and that's, if his analysis is right, then we are within about a 5 or 6 month window before that whole thing plays out.
And that would time reasonably well with cycles that typically happen with changes of power and presidential elections. And the duration of this artificial market that we've had since the 2008 crash is highly suggestive of the fact that it's just really, really hard to keep all these plates juggled in the air as the powers that be have been able to do so far. And I'd agree that we are, in fact, looking at least a 30% correction S&P 500 universe in the next 15 months. And I'm on record saying that. I think that it's going to unfold in sometime in 2017.
Wouldn't surprise me.
It's going to trigger a whole heck of a lot of other stuff too. I mean, Trump presidency or not, it really is kind of irrelevant because of the rot that is in the system, the huge amount of debt that we have, and I don't know if you saw it today. It was interesting, Dave. The 10-year auction was kind of a disaster. 39% of the bonds that they tried to sell were left at the dealers.
Yeah, I saw that. I mean, I think to me, it just gets back to the point. It doesn't really matter who's sitting in the chair in the Oval Office or which party has control. At some point, the laws of economics have to kick in. And the world's had enough of U.S. Treasury debt in their portfolios, and so if they're going to spend money the way Trump wants to spend money, it's going to have to be printed money, and you don't want to own Treasury bonds in an environment where the currency is being devalued.
Yeah, and I think that ultimately will be what unhinges the confidence of the Fed having everyone's back, and I think that the whole nonsense about an infrastructure spend of multi-trillions involving more than one nation worldwide will end up crowding out the credit market and sending interest rates higher. And the infrastructure, even though it's unbelievably inefficient for governments to be able to do what they do when they ramp up their programs as they do with bridges to nowhere and $500 toilet seats and all of the craziness that happens with government spending. The bottom line with that kind of stuff, though, is that it's a lot different than the monetary largesse and the saving of the system that's gone on since 2008, because a good chunk of that stuff was just sequestered on the Federal Reserve's balance sheet and not entering into the economy. People like Larry Summers, who pontificate about how wonderful this whole infrastructure idea is going to be in terms of rebooting the whole global economy and all that, make the assumption that interest rates are not going to get away from them. They make the assumption that we're going to be able to make great advantage use of these record, 400 plus year lows in interest rates. But 6 months after these infrastructure plans are announced and they start beginning to borrow for them, and the scope of the amount of spending is more understood by the markets, the expectations are just going to explode interest rates higher. And that could explode the federal debt that already exists and the service of that debt. If we had something like 5% rate on the 10-year, we'd be paying an extra, I don't remember exact number of what it is, but it's like $800 billion in debt service on an annual basis to the annual budget that would be added if we went somewhere near normalized interest rates. So that bomb that's out in the future is going to eventually be visible to people. The inflation/interest rate paradigm bomb is going to go off. And I think that's what's going to take things down next year. So that speaks to exactly what you're talking about, Dave. It really doesn't matter who's president in the sense of what's going to happen with our financial markets, because the debt is just too damn big. The problems are too damn grave. And in order to fix things, they don't have tools anymore that work. We're stuck. They've screwed up the system beyond repair. And the only repair is the catharsis of letting bad assets go to heaven.
Do you really think that's going to happen, though?
I do. I think that we're going to see a giant stock market correction and a backup in the bond market that's going to blow people away who consider bonds as the area where, we've had a market where people are like Pavlovian dogs chasing high yield because there is no yield for anything safe in the treasury market. And people who, buy bond funds and are trying to steer away from the stock market just to be able to participate with capital gains as the deflationary trends made, that trade work for a number of years. All of that's going to unwind. All of that is going to explode on people. We're going to have a huge problem in both equities and the bond market. And that's really what's going to put the afterburners on precious metals. And we might have an intermission, and then today's action in the market is kind of like a nice allegory to that possible dynamic, 2-3 months where we might have a slight period of people just getting punch drunk with the transition. So I haven't really assessed what kind of probability I would put on that scenario, but I've been cognizant of it, and it makes me a little bit nervous when I look out today and see how the markets have reacted the way that they have. And yeah, I fully agree with you, Dave. It's largely central banking actions that are doing what we see in the tape painting today. But there's a little more going on here too. And it's going to take some time to figure out, the after election assessment in terms of how this is all going to shake out.
Well, Have we beat this horse into the ground? Is it dead yet?
Could
I'm
be.
just looking at some of the stocks and selected stocks that would probably be on the top of any short sellers list. Caterpillar, which has had something like 46 months in a row of declining retail sales. Caterpillar stock, and it also has a ticking time bomb on its balance sheet in the form of financing that it extends to its buyers, many of whom are going to start defaulting. The stock is up 7.6% today on no news. There's no news. But I think it's one of the stocks that they're using to drive the Dow higher.
Yeah, that would make sense, and it also is, something that people think of when they think infrastructure, right or wrong. That's part.
Yeah, I thought about
maybe going
that.
on.
But yeah, I thought about that aspect, but I don't think that's what it is.
And it also, too, it's not just direct applications of infrastructure, but indirect as well. I mean, Trump's been favorable towards the coal industry, for example, and energy overall, and he'll probably be doing things that will have a positive impact on Caterpillar's sales generically.
I mean, if you look, also the other stocks that are like going turbo here are some of the really funky, risky finance stocks. Like there's one called Credit Acceptance Corp that basically, when you drive down a busy boulevard in your hometown and you see a used car dealer and they say, buy here, pay here, we finance any credit. Well, that's Credit Acceptance is behind that. Their stock tumbled $22 the other day on their earnings. And today it's up $14. It's up over 8%. There's another stock, and it's called World Acceptance Corp, and it's the same thing. It's subprime garbage lending. That stock's up 14% today. So, and there's a lot of other risky, I call them risky financial stocks that I follow, and they're all up a crazy amount. Morgan Stanley is up 7%. So you got all the highest risk, highest beta, nuclear balance sheet stocks are up, high single digits to double digits percent wise. I mean, it just shows you how insane the stock market and how manipulated this market is.
Yeah.
I think this is probably sort of a dead cat relief bounce going on in the market. I think, if you want to say it's anything besides central bank intervention with the bank's help, with the Wall Street bank's help, you could say, oh, well, it's a relief rally that this just god-awful Orwellian election is behind us. And, I'm with you, Eric. I think that we're going to get an upside down U-turn here sometime within the next couple of months. It's going to shock people.
Yeah. So what do you think are the odds of Trump actually doing something productive when it comes to addressing the Federal Reserve?
None.
We know he's going to can Janet Yellen. That's an easy forecast.
I mean, he might change that, but someone will convince him to put Stanley Fischer in there. I mean, Stanley.
Yeah,
Fischer,
God, that would be a nightmare.
Yeah,
he's like a Bernanke clone. He's actually very intelligent and very articulate and better than Yellen would ever dream to be in terms of being able to pull the wool over people's eyes. That's what concerns me most about Stanley Fischer. Yellen is kind of a goofy grandma archetype. You can kind of see through her shenanigans pretty easily. You've had your fair number of poking fun in articles at Yellen, I must say, Dave. They've been amusing articles over the years.
She's such an easy target, and it's just infuriating that she's the head of the Fed.
We've been speaking with Eric Dubin, who is the managing editor over at The News Doctors, and you can find all his work at thenewsdoctors.com. Eric, certainly appreciate all your time today.
It was great talking to you guys.
Yeah, Eric, thanks for coming on here. I figured you'd be able to shed some light on what exactly happened yesterday, because I know there's still a lot of people scratching their heads, especially the people who thought that Hillary Clinton was a shoo-in.
Yep, even Hillary herself was shocked, I'd imagine.
I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall during the last couple hours. Would have loved to have been a fly on the wall in her campaign war room just to see her her facial expressions.
Yeah.
Hear all the cussing.
Ooh.
You'd have to like duck. Chairs would be flying. Bill would be on the other side of town.
Bill was in some brothel somewhere. He wasn't anywhere near that war room.
He was on an island.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, it's great talking to you.
Thanks, Eric.
I'll be good.